Hey friends. So I've had a day where I've just felt I've had it's a day that has provided a kind of continuum for me to highlight something that I've almost never maybe highlighted in my own awareness quite so clearly. It's funny because as I was thinking about doing my post on this, I started to think, wait a minute, I just did a post on something pretty similar a couple days ago where I talked about the altitudes of communication and basically looking at what level of awareness is the impulse or the emanating source of our communication. Because, I think the argument, if I recall what I said correctly, from a few days ago, I was talking about the fact that the altitude at which we're communicating and therefore also kind of seeing the world. I likened it to Ken Wilber's work on a spectrum of consciousness and the various reasonably definable worldviews that sort of emerge successively as an individual consciousness grows and matures, and as the same thing can happen collectively. And just noticing that in my own communication, if my goal or if the outcome of an interaction or of a communication, whether it's of one person or with an theoretically infinite number of people, if the goal is to unify, then we're going to want to raise the altitude that we're communicating from, raise our level of consciousness, expand, right? Higher consciousness is expansive. That's the sensation we have if we're sitting in meditation and we have some glimpses or prolonged experiences of kind of satori or unity consciousness. It's a feeling of vast expansion. And in relationship, that vastness, that infinity, has the power to unite. It has the power to unite by embracing smaller, discrete domains of life or perspectives on life, whatever we happen to be working with. So my insight from a couple days ago was about this unity, the capacity of communication to unify, and if that's actually our intention, then how, what might be a helpful yardstick of how effective we're going to be at that is, where in my own consciousness am I coming from? Am I coming from the mind? Am I coming from the heart? Am I coming from the sort of like vastness of consciousness, which oftentimes I find it's almost like it feels like channeling. It feels like something's coming through me that I don't even know what the next word out of my mouth is going to be. It's just happening. So anyway, that was a brief recap, not that brief, of my previous post. But what was coming through today was I was just looking on a more kind of concrete level, a more sort of like visceral experience level. What happens to me when I experience a hardship or a disappointment, or something doesn't go the way I want it to, some conversation doesn't go the way I want it to, some interaction, some project takes a turn I don't want it to take. The experience of that is always kind of, there's an emotional component to it, and it's always very much within my current circumstances that I'm looking at and seeing them generally sort of like in contrast or conflict with where I want it to go or where I think it should go, right? There's a limited sphere of perception happening. And very quickly, if I take that limited sphere and I kind of just push it a little further from myself so I can see it from a little further away, and I observe it not simply in the context of like my own whatever I want to have happening, but I observe it in the context of a broader continuum of life, this can be very much my own experiences. It doesn't have to be. I'm not trying to get some kind of cosmic objectivity on the experience. I'm just saying, let's look at it in a slightly longer string of my own experiences. Immediately, what happens is the event morphs into, the word that came to mind was principle. So in other words, what I'm experiencing here morphs into, it goes from being a specific emotional, psychological experience right now into being something I can perceive in a continuum as part of a succession or a cycle of experiences, and a lot of times, the timeline of a relationship or a project or whatever is long enough that we can see, oh, yeah, this is just that moment. This is just that moment in the story. And it's kind of like takes me back to the narrative research book that I'm reading right now, and it's got me totally fascinated, because it's like I go from watching the movie and thinking, that hero's in trouble. Oh my God, are they going to die? Are they going to go over the cliff? Are they going to, oh no, all is lost. They failed. Are they going to overcome failure? Right? I go from being very invested in the concrete details of this story to seeing more like the Hollywood screenwriter, oh, inciting incident, the hero's call, the midpoint, turning point, all is lost, culmination, denouement. I start seeing my own experiences a little more, not that like I'm all of a sudden seeing myself in a Hollywood script, but I see events as being the embodiment, the immediate visceral embodiment of principles and of narrative principles, narrative arcs that I'm creating and or assimilating, and immediately that allows me to extract meaning from the experience that wasn't there before. Because when I'm just wrestling with it, it's like all I've got is a little, whether it's frustration or whether it's whatever is coming up about the conflict between where I am and where I want to be. That's that's all I got when I'm in it like that. There's no other perspective really informing how I handle the moment. But as soon as I move it out there a little ways, and I'm like, oh, this is something that can be described, and in some ways it is an intellectualization or a spiritualization. It's a kind of moving something from a kind of concrete experience to an experience of principle. And as long as that's not being, like, I think that's a power that can certainly be abused. It's a power that can certainly become a form of escape, because right here, right now, there's pain, there's frustration, there's what I'm feeling right now. And I there's almost like a way in which we can do that remove process that's like a form of repression. It's a form of, I don't want to feel this anymore. Let me push it out there where I can think about it. Now my mind can think about it, but my body doesn't have to feel what's going on. And wouldn't recommend that. It's usually not, usually doesn't lead to good. At the same time, we don't want to be limited by that kind of like, by the absence of perspective, by the absence of a greater perspective, because why would we want to do that? Why would we want to spend a bunch of energy churning on something that ultimately the resolution isn't to be found there, and actually it's part of something that it's already doing its job. Those experiences are doing their job. We don't have to worry about, like, if I have an event, or if I have an experience that's frustrating, that event is doing its job. If I trust that the universe is giving me what I need, it's doing what it needs to do. That event is here for a reason. So, assuming that, with that trust in mind, can I regard a particular event in my day and allow it to communicate what it's doing to allow it to communicate the job it's actually doing. Because it may not be that my immediate experience contains that content. That might be precisely what it is that the universe is trying to give me. But the altitude of my awareness, man, that's where it's at. That's what allows us to let in and kind of see through our own, what appear to be obstacles in our immediate path. And I think I'm just appreciating that. It's come through clearly. I just had it kind of arrive as an insight a couple days ago, and it's shown up again. So maybe it's something for me to listen to. Who knows? Maybe there's an even greater epiphany on the other side of this, or at the very least, a sense of consciously employing this knowledge. Because I can still get good and hooked on an emotional event, or what I perceive as a frustrating event. Man, I can sink my teeth into that. And it's, I don't know. Maybe it's not always my favorite way to spend my time. Just saying. So anyway, I offer that as my evolutionary kind of self-awareness insight for the day. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Much love. Happy Friday. I'll see you soon.